Okay. I think we're live. Can you hear me, Gary?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Excellent. Very good. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our event this evening. My name is Ed Damiano. I'm a professor of biomedical engineering at Boston University and co-founder of Beta Bionics. I think we will give people a few minutes to join, and then I'm going to introduce our guest today.
Do it. Let's do it.
All right, let's get started. Welcome again, everyone. Thank you for joining our event. We have just a few sort of logistical items to take care of at the beginning. We want to let you know we're going to be recording this event, so you can come back and watch it at any time if you can't see it in its entirety today. And feel free to we're inviting people to submit questions in the comments that we can address either as we go along with our conversation with Gary or at the end if there's time. We have about an hour today for this event, and let's get started. So, as I said, my name is Ed Damiano. I'm a professor of biomedical engineering at Boston University and co-founder of Beta Bionics. And I have the pleasure today to be joined by Gary Forbes. He is a former NBA player. He has a remarkable story to share with you this evening. He's been living with type 1 diabetes and has a long lineage. His story goes back really 3 generations, which is quite amazing in its own right. But as you come to hear Gary's story, you'll see just how spectacular it is with the diagnosis of T1D and then going on to being one of only 3 people ever to play in the NBA with T1D. And we're quite pleased to have him here, especially given that he's recently become an iLet user. So he has been on the iLet Bionic Pancreas as of recently. And he'll talk a little bit about, of course, his experience with T1D and living with T1D as an athlete with T1D, but also with his recent experience with the iLet and how he's seen life through that lens recently. And also he'll tell us a little bit about his journey beyond outside of just professional athletics, but also in his work in philanthropy, his work in founding Soul Survivors. Love to hear more about that. So let's begin by allowing Gary to sort of tell his story from his own words. And we'll begin with some questions and take any questions from you as we go along. Gary, thanks for joining us.
Oh man, I'm thrilled, excited to be here. Thanks for having me. We had a little technical difficulties in the beginning, but we got through it. We pushed through it. Excited about that. But for everyone joining, thank you for being here. Really appreciate you guys taking the time to come and listen to me and Ed chat about T1D. As Ed said, I'm one of 3 players to have ever played in the NBA with type 1 diabetes. I was diagnosed at 19 after my freshman year in college. He did say that it's a 3rd generation of living with type 1 diabetes. My grandfather, my father, and now myself. Um, I've created this platform, this children's multimedia platform called Soul Survivors, which is to empower children with chronic health conditions like T1D to pretty much just go after life and not look at a chronic health condition as something that would hold you back. I am a recent iLet user. I've been on manually delivered injections for 20 years. This past year, I started to use technology a lot more, and it's definitely changed my perspective in life living with type 1 diabetes.
Well, thanks for that, Gary. So, can you just tell us a little bit of of your journey, from the time of really of your diagnosis, or maybe even before that, just sort of some experiences you've shared with me about, witnessing your dad's, struggle with type 1, and how that impacted you, but also as an athlete, and sort of tell that story for us a little bit.
Yeah, my dad, Roberto Forbes, who's not here with us anymore, but he left a legacy. He left so much impact with his actions, his words, and how he was able to raise me and my family. Um, I never saw diabetes as a weakness. He was an Olympic lifter, a cyclist, worked on the Panama Canal, kind of did everything that a normal, person without a chronic health condition can do. So I didn't see any lack or anything that I couldn't do, because he always told me that I can pretty much do anything that I put my mind to. I remember when I was diagnosed at the age of 19, I called my dad and, wondering, I was like, man, I've seen you do everything. I've seen you take injections and things like that. The only thing, I was pretty much scared of needles. But he talked me through it, let me know that, I'm a Forbes. That's his biggest thing. He would always not be surprised of anything that we did, whether, I scored 30 points in a game or I got an A. He would always say, you're a Forbes and you're able to do anything. So that kind of confidence and optimism that he taught me and kind of poured into me led me to be able to be one of three players that play in the NBA. I seen him every single day exercise, work out, go to work, and do everything normal. So seeing him take injections, it was almost like he was just taking a pill. So I pretty much correlated that with managing or living with type 1 diabetes.
Well, so and your dad, of course, went through all this really without the advantage of med technology, right?
Yes.
He had the drugs, he had fortunately he had insulin and some of the advances that came there, but he really did. It sounds like he didn't use technology either because it wasn't available at the time or he chose not to. But he sort of struggled with all the things people with T1D do, but without technology. And you spent much of your time using multiple daily injection as a preference. So throughout that process and before you went on the islet, you had many challenges that you've groped with and pushed through. Can you talk a little bit about some of those challenges specifically?
Yeah, I think for me, I was very, very hesitant about technology. I've always felt that I had control over my body. I should be able to understand what my body is doing, and if I eat the right foods and I exercise and do all these things, everything should be all right. And after playing basketball in the NBA, where I had pretty much the team doctors and staff pretty much to take care of me, and learning to do that on my own was a little bit challenging. I've been in a diabetic coma. I've had two major car accidents due to mismanagement of T1D, not necessarily, or taking too much insulin and not understanding, the range that I was supposed to be in or how much to take. And um, I know that I'm covered for a reason. I know I have a purpose. There was a reason that I went through all these things, so that I can share this message with everyone that's on this live in the world, that I went through that so you wouldn't have to go through that.
Mhm.
I was super, super hesitant with technology. Thanks to the diabetes community, I have friends in the diabetes community that were pushing for me to get on a CGM and get on a pump. And now being a father, those things are very important, and to know that I can't pretty much take chances that I did before, and I haven't had any one of those episodes in the last 2 years. So it's been a great, great journey to get here. I'm actually glad that I went through those things and able to see what not to do. And now using the iLet, a lot of things have gotten simpler and easier as I like to think about diabetes. I don't like to think about it as an illness or a disease. It's a chronic health challenge that I live with and I'm in control of.
Yeah, so it sounds, but there's a big difference between sort of the way you used to manage diabetes, the way you were managing it with the iLet now, or the way the iLet is managing your diabetes, and you're maintaining that device. Can you talk about how you manage to juggle family, philanthropy, training, athletics, creative work that you're doing now before the islet with the injection therapy that you were on, and any other maybe semi-automated device you might have been using, and then now with the islet, how does your daily life with diabetes look different in this recent time since you've switched to the islet?
So before when I was on multiple daily injections, now hindsight, I'm looking back at the time that it took, right? Drawing up the insulin, giving myself injections, cleaning the area, and doing those 3 to 5 times a day. Let's say it takes 2 to 3 minutes per each injection. That's 15 minutes a day over time, over a week, over a month, over a year. That's time that I don't get back. And now using the iLet, It's so simple. It's able to learn what I eat, kind of like your pancreas does. There's no counting carbs. For someone who doesn't live with type 1, they don't have to worry about counting carbs because their pancreas does the job for them. And now to see that, now to have that access to, I guess, freedom and, lack of stress and lack of worrying about what my blood sugar is doing, to have something pretty much replace my pancreas in a
Mhm.
sense. It's helped me so much where I'm not really worrying. Sometimes when I look at my iLet and I see I'm in range, I'm like, man, I didn't even do anything. And so that I guess stress is a good thing sometimes, but that stress free feeling of not having to worry, especially when I sleep way more comfortable now, not having to hear alarms or worrying about, man, did I give myself too much insulin, because the islet does the job for you.
Mhm. And the thing is that it does do the job for you. And the thing that I think about a lot with diabetes tech is, until quite recently, diabetes technology was managed by the patient and the provider completely. They controlled all the insulin dosing. They titrated and determined every single dose. That fell squarely on the shoulders of the person living with diabetes and their family members. And so, these systems were not adapted to the person. The person had to adapt their lives to what I would call limitations in the technology until quite recently. And specifically, the iLet being so automated, it was designed to adapt to you and to your changing needs. So can you talk a little bit about, how, important the adaptability of the device? I know we haven't been on it too long, but you certainly a very physical guy, and you've challenged it, I'm sure, already in the weeks you've
Yeah.
been on it. Um, how important the adaptability of the islet is to your ability to be physical, to be athletic, and have you seen it actually, in fact, adapt to your needs?
Yeah, previously, before, when I was either multiple daily injections or any kind of automated system that I used before, I'll be working out. Sometimes I'll have lows and things like that. Now I've been working out the last month with the iLet. I haven't had a single low during a workout,
Mm,
uh, and having that, again, that stress free feeling that this is doing the job for me and it's learned my body. The first day, it was a little challenging just because it has to get to know your body and how you eat and the things that you normally do on an everyday basis. That was literally the only, challenge that I felt or that I had to go through. And challenges are good. I learned from it. Learned to do everything that I needed to do with the islet, and the islet in turn learned everything about me. And now, we're smooth sailing. I think I checked my the A1C or the GMI previously. Before, it was in the low sevens, maybe 7.1. Just last week, it was at 6.7. So that's a great thing.
yeah.
Having that A1C a little bit lower, trying to get under 6.
I understand. So that's very ambitious, but still, those are great numbers. Even before, certainly, but it sounds like the islet may be helping. It's early days yet, of course,
Yeah.
but I'm encouraged to see in early days it's doing well. So if you sort of think back to when you first heard about the islet, um, what stood out about this technology? I mean, why did you make this leap of faith? To some extent, that's really what it is, especially with the iLet, given how automated it is. You are making a leap of faith. You are letting the device determine every single dose, titrate all the insulin for you. That's a huge leap of faith for people with T1D who are so responsible for it. So, why did you make the leap of faith? What was it about the device that drew your attention?
Simplicity. Keeping it simple. There was, no counting carbs or, having to dose, certain number of units of insulin. It pretty much, I just click breakfast, lunch, or dinner, and, it does the job for me. I haven't seen a simpler device or a pump in the world, and the bionic pancreas is the perfect name for it because it's literally almost replacing what you lost in a sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've seen so much positive in the last few weeks, especially with my numbers. It's really, really happy that none of these alarms wake up my wife or child in the middle of the night that I used to before. and not having to have these scary lows and situations which I've had in, in the past 21 years living with type 1. So to have that stress free, I know it's amazingly a sense of relief for my wife, and me being able to be with my child every day and not having to worry about lows or anything happening to me, because the islet is pretty much learned my body and adapted to everything that I do in my everyday life.
Yeah, and that sort of brings me to the next question, which has to do with your role as a parent now and as a mentor as you've been to young people, and you also mentioned your wife and how the type one has bearing on her life. Um, how do you think a device that sort of automatically handles all of the insulin dosing impacts your family? I mean, you touched on it with your wife, but also extend that to your child and to people you mentor, people who have type one, who look up to you and role model after you.
I think it's the time that you don't have to sit there and count carbs, or even that stress and worrying about, did I take enough insulin or did I count the right amount of carbs? That time you cannot ever get back. And I guess over the years, 15 minutes a day, and you count that up for 20 years, it's a lot of time that I necessarily haven't been able to get back. And now, being a father and being a present father like I am, and an entrepreneur, I'm able to not having to worry about counting carbs. And I wasn't a great carb counter to begin with. So this kind of helps that take off that load, or that worry about, man, that I dose the right amount of insulin for this food. And for my wife, it's she says she's very, very happy that I chose to use an automated system where I don't have to necessarily do that much work. And this gives me the freedom that I've already wanted to have. Generally, with living with type 1 diabetes, I've never put a "oh woe is me" attitude, or felt stressed about having type 1 diabetes. So this actually helps that and emphasizes my stress-free idea of living with type 1 or managing type 1 diabetes.
Yeah. So you meet a lot of kids and kids with chronic conditions, and I think that has inspired your efforts with Soul Survivors and the creation of that platform. So, can you tell me how a technology, particularly like this one, in the case of T1D, many chronic conditions that you've certainly been encountering with your new platform, but um, how does a technology like this help people who do live with chronic conditions feel more confident, allow them to chase their dreams, be aspire toward achieving their goals? You speak a lot about that. I'd like you to just talk a bit about that, and especially how the technology weaves into that.
Yeah, I believe I was, like I said, I was super hesitant with technology in the beginning. And hindsight, if I had the iLet, if I was using an automated system like this, I don't have a diabetic coma. I don't
Mhm.
have those two car accidents, where I totaled a car due to mismanagement with T1Ds. So those experiences never happened, and who knows where I'd be. But I decided to, I like you said, that leap of faith. I'm a big believer. Your present situation is not your final destination. So I knew how I was living with type 1 diabetes was going to get better. I've always had a vision of hope for better technology. I've seen, a lot of different things. People have a lot of different opinions on different tech, and it's very, very, I guess, weird to me in a sense. We all kind of live with this chronic condition for the millions of people that do. And having diabetes burnout, which is something that, I'm not familiar with, or anxiety or stress living with type 1 diabetes, this is a game changer because it removes all of these things that are so prevalent, like I said, diabetes burnout, anxiety, and all these stress managing and living with type 1 diabetes. So this kind of replaces, or puts that shield, or that arm or that hug around you to live your life freely.
Yeah. And of course, with that comes sort of the need to give up control. And that is so they kind of go hand in hand. You're trusting this device, which means you're giving up control that you've exerted for, maybe decades. People
Mhm.
live with diabetes for decades, for generations, and you do need to give up a tremendous amount of control. And people with T1D who are, well controlled, people who are, managing it day in and day out, which is essentially everyone with type 1 has to just really commit themselves to this. They're required to exert an extraordinary level of control over this metabolic process of controlling your glucose in your blood, right? Which is not something we evolved to do. So people are working really hard to do this. And especially with people with TMD who've lived with it for years, they may feel significant hesitation, as I no doubt you did, right, as you've mentioned, switching to a device where you sort of have to fall into the arms of the person behind you, right? So can you talk a little bit about that going into it, knowing you'd have to give up that control, or maybe you didn't appreciate it as much as you did once you were on it for the time you've been on it, and how do you recommend to someone else that they try and do that, just to sort of just trust the device and give it a try?
Yeah, like I was definitely like super hesitant. I was so I guess this ego or proud, man, I played in the NBA, manually, I mean, multiple daily injections. I can live the rest of my life doing the same thing. And, my life changed a little bit. I'm not, playing basketball, I'm not traveling, eating the kind of same foods. And everything changed after the diabetic coma and the car accident. So to give up that, it was, I literally didn't have anything to give up. It was literally having to make a change for, for my life. So using, this automated system has literally changed everything in my life. It's made it so much easier to do every single thing. I guess the only challenge I had at first was wearing a tube pump. It was very playing basketball or being an athlete for so many years, not having anything attached to my body, which was the main thing when I was diagnosed in 2004. I didn't want anything attached to my body. I didn't want people to look at me and say that, oh man, he's sick or he
Mhm.
has something. Now I'm very, very proud to show it off because I want people to ask questions. I want to keep spreading awareness and inspiring people that people with diabetes can do every single thing. I've obviously proven that, and there's so many stories out there that prove that, and I want to keep doing that so that the world understands that there's no limitations with type 1 diabetes. There are complications, but I believe that we are in control of those things. I guess if you use an iLet, you won't have a lot of those complications.
Yeah. And so one thing that comes up, especially in your realm, is being active with the islet. So you're very physically active, and questions come in, and we have some from the chat right now about exercise, especially with when you use some of these technologies, multiple daily injection or hybrid closed loop systems. You have to think about things like insulin on board
Mhm.
and try and do a calculus with that and how much physical exertion and the kind of physical exertion that you're about to embark upon. And so, can you talk a little bit now about your experience so far with exercising with the islet?
Yeah, I wake up every morning around 6 a.m. First thing I do is work out. And seeing before, I used to, let's say, wake up sometimes high, sometimes, not in range, would eat a little bit, go downstairs, work out, and end up high after workouts. Now, using the iLet, I wake up pretty much in range. I pause my insulin for about, 30 minutes before I work out, smoothly go through my workout, and after my workout I'm still in range. And I remember the first day when I worked out, I think I started at, I think, 120 or 110, 120 in that range. After the workout, hour long workout, I'm at 140. It's like, man, this is a totally different experience, a totally different change to see those numbers. It's like a report card. You see a good number, I'm like, man, this is good, this is working. And wearing it on my body, it's not as not as difficult as I thought it would be. I
Mhm.
made a joke with my friend. It's like, man, what are people who sleep naked and having to wear the the eyelid,
Yeah.
what do they do and things like that. So it's gotten pretty much simpler over the times. I sleep with it so normally it doesn't even affect me. I don't. It's almost part of me. It's a, like you said, the bionic pancreas, so
Yeah.
it's stays with me.
So, in all of that you just described, you never mentioned anything about having to think about insulin on board. Is
Yeah,
that right?
yeah. I literally haven't. Before I used to, and now I don't.
Yeah, yeah. And can you just talk a little bit about the kind of physical activity you talked about? A workout? Is that lifting? Is it aerobic? Is it all the above? What is it? What does it look like?
All of the above. I lift every morning. I run. Play basketball. Do a lot of. I'm chasing my son around, who's a 2 year old who I have to have a lot of energy for.
Mhm.
But yeah, every single day I work out, whether it be lifting weights, sprinting, playing basketball. I coach now, so having that experience where I'm on the court coaching, and I've never had a single low in the past month, or not. Yeah, during these workouts, I haven't had any lows during the workouts. Everything is in range, so it almost feels too good to be true. And then seeing my A1C numbers go down, it's like, man, this is what the technology was supposed to be like for everyone living with type 1 diabetes.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, I'd like to talk a little bit about your work creating soul survivors. So, how is your journey with that, building that platform? Um, you know, how has that fueled, the way you use storytelling, for example, to inspire others?
Yeah, at the end of my basketball career, I wanted to figure out what my purpose was. Like, what's my why? Why am I here? Why was I given the challenge of 6 knee surgeries, uh, diabetic coma, 2 car accidents? Like, what's the end goal? What am I supposed to do? And I looked at my childhood and looked at children's media, and how back in the days when I would watch Thundercats or Captain Planet or X-Men, those were cool hero stories that they went through challenges and they were able to overcome them, working as a team, or just having that stick to itiveness. And that's how I've always lived my life, being an athlete. I remember in second grade, I wrote down that I was going to go to the NBA, and I believed that. And I was crazy enough to believe that. And I was able to prove myself right by believing in myself. And now, towards it, like I said, end of my basketball career, like, what's my purpose? And I look back at all the things that help fuel my life and my desire to be in the NBA. And those cartoons, those stories helped. I loved X-Men, loved Professor X, who's one of my favorite X-Men characters. And I decided to change how children's media is portrayed. There's a prevalent, I guess, there's like a society of people that, there's kids now that are 8, 9 years old. They're talking about anxiety and depression, which I didn't have, or I didn't even know that word until I was an adult. And I wanted to change how children viewed themselves. I don't call diabetes a disease. I think just that word just sounds very.
Mhm.
If I call it a chronic health condition or a chronic health challenge, it's something that triggers in your mind that, okay, it's a challenge. Challenges are made to be, challenges are supposed to be overcome. And I've done that. And I wanted to not only just show that with my own journey. I think, you know, about maybe in the next couple of years, Gary Forbes will be this old guy. Like, who's this guy talking about? Now, creating these soul survivors characters who have the same chronic health conditions as children in the world. I believe that everyone knows somebody with something. I'm sure you know somebody with autism, or a child with autism, leukemia, cancer, all these different things. And I wanted to attack the numbers. There's over 40% of the children in the United States have at least one chronic health condition. 400 million children globally, and the numbers are rising, have at least one chronic health condition. And I've always seen the ask for representation, the ask for ending stigma, and Soul Survivors aims to do that with the representation and changing how the world is viewed with chronic health conditions. I see a world where now the kid at school who, unfortunately used to get bullied or teased with cancer or diabetes, now he's the cool kid because soul survivors represents a different perspective or a different way to look at it.
Yeah, for sure. That's really cool. Um, that whole, I mean, that was very interesting how you sort of evolved from professional athletics to building this platform. And so, when did that kick off? When did you kick off Soul Survivors?
That was in 2018, the year before my last season playing when I was in overseas in Vietnam. 2018, I remember I was in my car, crying. I'm very emotional, about things, and just seeing, I guess, a change. I had no idea basketball would end. I thought I'd be playing to, whenever I leave this earth. But obviously, those things come to an end, and I had to figure out what's my next step. And I think being an athlete, and I always tell, parents of children who are in athletics, having an external outlet like basketball was so great for me living with type 1 diabetes because it's almost like a if your numbers are in range or if your diabetes is in range, you get to do what you love, which is play basketball. And the only way I get to do what I love to play basketball is if my diabetes is in check.
Hmm.
So it made me a healthier person because I wanted to make sure I played basketball. So having an external outlet, whatever it is you want to do, I think that removes the stress and anxiety or the worry about, what's happening. If you do these things, if you do, what you're meant to do, or you do what you want to love to do, it's easy to do it because you put your health in front of that,
Hmm.
if
Hmm.
that makes sense.
It does. You made a comment in there about playing overseas.
Hmm.
And I remember when we were speaking previously, one of the big challenges you faced over those years was the very dramatic differences in food and how you had to adjust to that on the fly as you went from country to country.
Yeah.
And of course, you didn't have the benefit of the iLet back then. It wasn't on the market yet. So, can you talk a little bit about how you faced that challenge along with being, a professional athlete at the same time?
Yeah, every year I played 9 years overseas. Every year was different. Every year different, different country, different foods. The thing that I appreciated, living here and playing in college, I had a staff that was always basically around me and made sure that I was in, doing the right things, eating the right foods. My numbers were in range before practices and stuff like that. Going overseas, my first year, I played in Italy. I would have lows every single
Wow.
day after practice. Every single game, I would have lows post game, and it was so weird to me. It's like, man, I'm eating the same amount of carbs, or so I thought. I was eating pasta, I'm eating all these foods. And why am I low? Because I'm taking the same amount of insulin that I would, I would be taking if I ate the food over here. But overseas, the foods are cooked differently. So it was almost I was testing on myself. I tried different, different nutritional, nutritional styles, pescatarian, plant based, all these different things to see what was best for me. And not having or having to go to the doctor on your own and not having a team doctor there with speaking a different language, those things were a little bit challenging, but I think those things prepared me for, you know, living the life that I want to live. And, I know that challenges are part of, a cool story. So I'm so, in hindsight now, I'm so glad I was able to get through all those challenges and have the optimistic mindset that your present situation is not your final destination. So I
Mhm.
knew that those things were going to be part of a cool story. And here I am.
And so, I mean, you didn't have the benefit of the eyelet through all that. That was really all on your shoulders. Do you see, I mean, could you imagine what that might have been like in terms of burden had you had the eyelet through those years?
Let's see.
How would it have been different? Or how do you imagine it would have been different?
I don't have a diabetic coma, and maybe I'm probably still playing. I mean, LeBron is still playing right now, and we're the same age. We're in the same class, so who knows? Maybe I'll still be playing right now if I had a bionic pancreas, attached to me.
Yeah. So yeah, diabetes certainly inserted itself in your even in your professional career, right?
Correct, correct, correct.
So it might have played a role there too, the eyelet. Um, So, as you know, I'm a parent of a young man with type 1 diabetes, and he was diagnosed in infancy. So he's 20, all of 26 years old, and he's lived with type 1 for 25 of those years. And it's certainly something that, no parent pushes through, right? I'm going to, always have a son with type 1. He's got better tools than ever now to live with diabetes. But you're a parent, a young parent, and chasing your 2-year-old around. How can you speak a little bit about, how you think the islet could maybe positively impact your parenting, even though, he doesn't have type 1, but, um, you know, hopefully it stays that way. But
Yeah,
in
that's
terms of your
that's the plan.
parenting, what it offers you.
When my son was born, maybe 5 6 months into his early life, he had eczema, which was stressing me out every night. Like I'd cry because my son is scratching, and
Mhm.
I can't help him, and you know that that feeling is not a good feeling. And I know parents who have children who live with type 1, like that that lack of control that you want to have over your child, or keep your child safe. I know that has to be challenging. We were able to get through the eczema. He's cool now, no scratching,
Good.
perfect skin. But for a parent living has a child that living with type 1, I hear so many things about parents worrying about, can they play sports. I actually, the one of the coolest stories, which made me realize what my purpose was. When I was in MBA, I had this softball event, Strikeout Diabetes, every year. And a parent came up to me. She said that, thank you so much for inspiring us, and thank you for all the work you're doing. I'm thinking, like, man, I'm just being me. I'm, playing basketball. I had no idea that my story or my journey could impact, people's lives. So he got in the car, and he was like, Dad, I want to try out for basketball team tomorrow. Can I try out? And he was like, No, son, you have, T1D. You can't, really do that. Fortunately, his best friend was in the car. He was like, Gary Forbes is in the NBA and he has type 1. And I got chills, like, even thinking about that. It's like me just doing something that I love to do, and through the challenge of living with type 1 diabetes, inspired someone to do it. It's like, oh man, if Gary Forbes can do it, so can I. And
Mhm.
I think that's kind of my purpose here, is to show people a different perspective. I'm a huge optimist. I think every day when I wake up, they always ask me, people always ask me, how you doing today? And it's like, man, I'm alive. So it's only opportunities that are in front of me. So I look at that, to help, children and families kind of see a different perspective. As I told you before, it's like I look at it kind of as a video game. I chose this avatar. I chose, Gary Forbes. The avatar comes with 6 knee surgeries, a diabetic coma, 2 car accidents, but the avatar also comes with playing in the NBA, creating a children's multimedia platform that inspires and ends stigma and changes the perspective of living with a chronic health condition.
For sure. And then, sort of thinking about life with a chronic condition, diabetes is really quite unique in that it's a chronic condition where the patient, or in this case, the person who has the condition, is on the front lines every hour of every day,
Hmm.
titrating a drug that is very dangerous if dosed improperly, right? There's
Yes.
no other chronic illness quite like it, right?
No.
And the level of vigilance is truly daunting and not really sustainable because it doesn't go to sleep at night.
Mm.
So it truly isn't sustaining. So technologies, fortunately, in lieu of, or at least until, a biological cure can be engineered, um, technology has finally, med technology has finally matured to a point where it truly is impacting outcomes in a way it really wasn't for many, many years. And really, when you were diagnosed to the present, undergone a major transformation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
major.
so, can you talk a little bit about how technologies like hybrid closed loop systems, but even to a greater extent, the iLet, which I think of as a new category of device because it really automates all insulin dosing, not just some of the insulin, it takes the full responsibility of insulin dosing off the user and even the provider. How important are tools like that in the absence of a biological cure for the T1D community and living with this chronic condition?
It's super important, as you said. The type 1 diabetes is crazy. Myself, and someone who lives with type 1 diabetes can eat the same thing, do the exact same regimen every single day. We'll have different numbers, and that kind of blew my mind. It's like, man, we eat the same thing, or everyone wakes up with different numbers. Works out different numbers, so it's not something that's generic for everyone. And having something that replaces that generic lifestyle, let's say, of insulin dosing, counting carbs, I think it kind of goes back to I guess, the natural ability of the human body to do things on its own, which the iLet does. And having that technology, I think it's major. Like I said, it removes the stress, it removes the anxiety, it removes the diabetes burnout, it removes all these things that people are, people in the diabetes community, I guess, struggle with, or face every single day. I see, tons and tons of, people living with type 1 diabetes talk about, how challenging it is to count carbs. I haven't counted carbs in, over a month, and
Mhm.
been pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. So you rattled off a few things on what I would call a laundry list of challenges of life with T1D, hopefully ameliorated to some extent, if not a large extent, by the islet. But one thing that I have always thought, or had for a long time thought about, is the guilt that is attached to poorly performing your tasks such that you end up with bad glucose levels. So with in the old days, like a few years ago, before any kind of automation, every number, every glucose value you got, whether it was on a CGM or finger stick, was kind of on you, And so if you had a number that was in range, you could feel good about that. But worse, much, much worse, is those numbers that are out of range, which is more often than not, unfortunately, for most people. And every time you see that, you can't help but take some sense of responsibility or a large measure of responsibility for that failing. And I see that as like a cumulative trauma, like the seeing a bad glucose number over and over again, day in and day out, wears on you like a cumulative trauma.
Mhm.
And the guilt that's attached to that, I think, is extremely taxing on people in ways they might not really perceive. But I still think it's taking a toll. Have you any thoughts about that?
I would say I can imagine that. I mean, being an athlete, if I see a number, I'm not necessarily mad at diabetes. I
Mhm.
feel like you said, I'm more so looking at myself like, man, why, like, I'm supposed to be, better than this. And I live by the 5 Ps. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. So when I would see bad numbers, I would look at myself like, man, I'm almost did this to myself.
Mhm.
When I got into the car accident or diabetic coma, I felt, I was looking at myself like, man, I did this to me because, I wasn't properly prepared, and I should know better. I felt that living, with type 1 diabetes, playing in the NBA, I should have a better control of, the choices that I make. And like you said, every day is different. Some days your stress levels, or, your emotional level, all these things impact your numbers. I've been in, my wife. One of the craziest things that I knew that she was super connected to me. We would have discussions, and I guess I would get kind of irritated or kind of have these mood swings. And she's like, go check your, go prick your finger. And she's like, either you're low or you're high. And she would
Yeah.
know due to, how I was acting. And like that kind of blew my mind, understanding that your blood glucose has an impact on your mind, everything that you do, your emotions, your feelings, your energy. So again, to have the islet that removes all of that, it makes life so much easier.
Yeah. So there are three questions that came into the chat. The first one I want to address is, we talked a lot about your use of MDI, which for most of your life with T1D has been you've been managing it yourself with
Mhm.
MDI. Have you? One question came in about asking if you'd used any other pump technologies, or did you go straight from MDI to the iLet?
I was on another pump before. I was on the was it Omnipod before, and I just felt that for me, like you said, the simplicity of this. I wasn't a carb counter. I
Mhm.
wasn't someone who worried about what I ate. So I wanted something that kind of fit my lifestyle.
Yeah,
And I think for everyone with diabetes, like we want to live simpler lives. We don't want to have to worry about what foods we're eating. I mean, foods are energy. They're supposed to, go into our bodies and fuel our body, not necessarily raise our blood sugars and then have these complications from high blood sugars or low blood sugars. So, having this technology now, it's resonated with me and my lifestyle and how I, manage it. I know I've heard, before about they say that people who use the eyelet, are either like not in shape or, it's kind of like what was the word that they said? Something like basically that they're lazy.
lazy.
I mean, the people who don't live with type 1 diabetes, I guess they're lazy too. I mean, their pancreas does the job for them. So,
Mhm.
I kind of don't get that. I
I
mean, I
love that
know.
point you're making. So if you don't have type 1, you are inherently a lazy person because you don't have to titrate insulin all the time. I asked the following question. You can, if you're old enough, and you are, you can read an analog map, right? We used to
Correct.
use maps to get from A to B.
Mhm.
You couldn't see on the map where you were, but you could see where Syracuse, New York was, right? And so I got
Right.
to get there, and which roads am I going to take?
Correct.
And we could read a map. But all those people, myself included, who used to do that to get from A to B, do not do that anymore, right? We use our phone
Yep.
because technology has shown us a better way,
Yep.
right? And does it make me lazy or just simply a little bit smarter and have a little bit more bandwidth to not navigate the map in the old fashioned way or to use the Google Maps or Apple Maps to get there?
Yep. I mean, correct. Like, I mean, I would bet that someone who stresses out or has, thoughts about counting carbs every single day and how, tough it is, certain meals are different. You don't actually don't know what kind of oils, let's say if you eat out a lot, you don't know what kind of oils or what exactly they're putting into it. So
Right.
you may dose a certain amount and then now you're mad at yourself, like, oh man, I ate this. So now you're adding even more anxiety and more stress to already the stress of counting the carbs and doing all these calculations. Um, I just think it helps people get back into that normal sense of living without having to do all this mental math and all this thing that we weren't necessarily meant to do. We
Mhm.
weren't carb counters. We just ate food, and
Yeah.
that was energy.
So there are a couple more questions in the chat I want to get to in a particular order. So let's start with with this one about you know the let's see, we asked about pumps. We talked about pumps, and one of these things is related to technology, but also sort of the future of life with T1D. Of course, a biological cure is what we're all after, right? But separate from that, or in between where we are now and that eventuality, whenever that may come, what other things do you look forward to? You probably heard that Beta Bionics is very committed to building a patch pump, right? And also a bihormonal device, which infuses insulin to lower blood sugar levels, but also glucagon automatically to raise it. I presume you've heard a little bit about that.
Yes, yes, I did. Very happy about that.
Yeah. So, can you talk a little bit about the future of technology as you see it and what you would look forward to between now and a biological cure?
I mean, to see, to watch my father having to urinate on little sticks
Mhm.
and kind of guess where his glucose was at. You would say high or low. You don't know what number you're exactly at. To watch him do that and to have, he used to use these huge needles, like huge thick needles. And over time, the needles got thinner and, better. And the CG, I mean the finger pricks and the glucose monitors. So it's like I think in the years from when he was diagnosed to now, it's like it's out of this world, like how
Yeah.
technology has just warped, and I only see it getting better. Having CGM, having an iLet definitely saved my life. Now that I don't have to worry about those things, it's saving my life because I don't have to go through those experiences ever again. And I feel so much more comfortable, traveling, driving in the car, not having to worry about, man, what's my number or how do I feel? I don't have to necessarily depend, even though I would, I would have loved to, be able to not having to use technology and be in range and do all those things. But like you said, it's a smarter way. If I was still using MapQuest and having to drive in my car and turn to paper,
Yeah.
that would not be a great thing. But now,
MapQuest. I like that reference. Right?
so now having Waze and Google Maps, where I could just put it in, plug my phone in and have it right on the car, and now I see where I'm going. So I compare that to the islets. Like I have diabetes, and I want to have great numbers. I want to have a low, a great A1C, and this does the job for me. So I use it.
Yeah, of course. So a couple of the questions. One that came in a few minutes ago was putting on the spot a bit. If you can figure this one out, can you tell us at least a funny, if not your funniest story related to T1D?
It's kind of embarrassing, but it's funny.
Apparently, you have something in mind.
It's embarrassing. It's funny, but it's funny though. So I remember when I was a little kid, maybe 8 or 9 years old. My father, we were in Home Depot, and my father, I guess he had to use the bathroom, and there was no bathrooms in the Home Depot, or it was closed. And my father, unfortunately, peed himself, urinated on himself.
Mhm.
And as a kid, I'm thinking like, man, what are you doing? It's like you're grown enough. Like, what are you doing? And I laughed, and my mom scolded me on that, and I had no idea because my dad really didn't talk about diabetes. He just lived his life. He was more so of he showed me how to live instead of telling me how to live, right? And so fast forward to myself, this is actually the first time I've ever told this story
Oh my!
to the community. It's crazy. So go to this gym in New York City, and I have to use the bathroom. So I'm at the lobby, and there's no bathrooms in the lobby, so I'm having to rush upstairs. So I get in the elevator. This elevator's slow. I have to go to like maybe the 15th floor, and I'm like, wow, this happens to me at this time. So I'm like, man, do I pee in the elevator or do I just pee my pants? Right? Like, so I'm like, man, I
There's no
don't.
third option.
Yeah, there's no third option. So get out the elevator, and I'm rushing to open the door. There's nobody, there's no doorman at that door to let me in. There's usually a person there that just presses the button, and the bathroom is right there. So I can't get in that way. So I try to go around the back of the building, or the back of the floor, and try to go through the back way. That door's locked. And I was just like, man, I gotta do what I gotta do. And ended up, peeing on the floor. Um, I was trying to clean it up. I got got towels. Was trying to clean it up and things like that. And my thing was, it wasn't necessarily, I didn't feel there was a stigma. I didn't feel, man, these people don't understand. I a little bit. It's like, man, I didn't necessarily come here to pee on the floor. Like this is something that
You're not.
my body just happened to do. I had no control of it,
Yeah.
and I was able to talk to the people and kind of let them know that, these are some of the complications or the accidents that happen with type 1 diabetes. You literally have no control over your bladder.
Mhm.
Hasn't those things haven't happened to me? I think it was almost I had to go through that to feel what my father went through.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I guess that it was a little embarrassing, definitely embarrassing, but it was funny. Just because I always have a different perspective on it. And I still laugh about it to this day. My friend who was with me, he was like, "Man, bro, like that was a weird, funny experience,
But
and that's
it's so good that you can see the humor in it, right? Because
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
lot of people would just be mortified, right? And yet,
Right, man. But
I'm glad you
yeah,
enjoyed
I
it.
laugh about it every day.
Yeah,
It's funny to me.
for sure. So, on the lighter side, still, just because I think a lot of folks tuning in would like to sort of understand how you live with diabetes and right down to the minutia, like, what's your go-to snack for lows?
So I've actually, I'm not big on. I know dextrose and like eating Skittles and all these different candies are good. I used to be big on M&Ms. I love peanuts, but I've actually seen a great deal of positive reactions eating dates. I love dates, and I think those things like dates and orange juice. I wasn't really big on orange juice before. I was a big apple juice drinker, but now the way that orange juice kind of quickly, targets lows. I think it's helped me a lot, but definitely eating dates and my usual daily regimen of food. I wake up in the morning. I have either matcha. I'm not a coffee drinker. I drink matcha, pancakes, eggs. I like low carb meals a lot, just because I only eat carbs, let's say post meals or pre workout things to give me the energy to go through it, and carbs to kind of fuel my body after working out. But besides that, pretty much whole plant based, maybe 80-20 on plant based to eating, poultry and chicken and steak and things like that.
I love the dates, by the way, as
I
a
love it.
go-to low snack. That's
Yeah.
really cool. It's got a lot
I,
of it's a pretty wholesome alternative to some of the others. That's great.
yeah.
And sometimes people just get tired of the D tabs or the Skittles. So that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I had made a quick reference to glucagon, and I just wanted to say here that that was something that occurred to me. A bihormonal, a two hormone solution to automating glucose control was something that I sort of started thinking about 25 years ago. The week my son was diagnosed, this seems like the obvious thing. You want to be biomimetic and do what the pancreas does as much as possible. And at first, we've integrated this whole CGM together with automated insulin dosing. But ultimately, bringing glucagon into the equation is going to be key because of the very thing we just spoke about, right? What is your go to snack for lows? Well, hopefully, if that can't completely go away through this approach, we can dramatically reduce it with a bihormonal approach. And that's always been my commitment. And I'm happy to say that Beta is as committed to that as ever and is pushing that forward. So I just want people to know that that is a major priority. It's right on the product pipeline, and it is something investors invested in Beta for that, and they still want to see that happen. So that's making good progress, as I understand it, and they are fully committed to it, and they speak to it at every earnings report. So that's really great to know. Um, there we came past the top of the hour, but we got started a little bit late. So I did want to say, there was one kind of takeaway question here that I think's worth putting out there. I mean, I think you've kind of answered it, but it's kind of nice to put a bookend on it, and that is, for everyone watching this tonight or in the future, if they could sort of walk away from this, what is the one takeaway from your journey of life with diabetes to the present day with your experience such as it is so far with the iLet, and what would you want them to remember?
I think living with optimism is my superpower. So I always look at the bright side of things. I remember we were talking earlier about having quote unquote bad days living with type 1. And when people kind of talk about, their year or their life with type 1 diabetes, okay, there's 365, 366 days in a year. Let's say you have 75, let's say you have 100 bad days with type 1 diabetes. You still have 265 or 266 great days or good days with type 1. So you're over 50%. I look at percentages, shooting a basketball. If you shoot over 50%, you're a great shooter. You're one of the, best in the world. So I look at those things, kind of in that way. These bad days are, lessons. I don't look at losses as a loss or a bad thing, they teach me how to not, go through that same route or do something different to get a different result. So what they said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over, expecting a different result. I think managing type 1 diabetes and the fact that we have different numbers and every day is a new day, it's kind of fun. What better way to live life than do everything possible to have the greatest amount of energy, the greatest amount of, strength and all these different things. I live by the 5 Ps. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. I'm a big cliche guy. My dad always used to say, doubt your doubts before you doubt your faith. He was big into optimism. And I think everyone living with type 1 diabetes um, should have that. I think it helps our condition, it helps our lifestyle, it helps, the day to day challenges of managing the lifestyle living with type 1 diabetes. And, I would say to everyone living with type 1, like you said, you've seen in the beginning all your research in the years. I wish my father would have been here, to see all this technology, and he could have lived to maybe 100, with the iLet or any, using a CGM, to see him not be able to see this fully through. Sometimes it's I guess sad in a sense, but the fact that he was able to teach me how to live with optimism and not look at bad days, or even that day, having him pee himself in the Home Depot, and to see his mindset after that and not let it stress him out or wear him out. I think that was passed on to me, and not, I didn't have the, like you said, the oh woe is me, and
Yeah,
killing myself because I did the same thing.
yeah, that's a wonderful sentiment. I appreciate that. Um, So, for Gary, I want to thank you for participating here. I think we've pushed this a little beyond the top of the hour, but I really did want to get to these additional questions that came in at the end there. And thank you once again for sharing your story. Amazing as it is, we really we need to hear these stories, and just so many of us are going through one way or another as a parent, as a as a spouse, or living with diabetes, having diabetes. We all have our own stories, but there's a lot of common ground. There's a lot of
Mhm.
commonality, a lot of the same pressure points. So it's lovely to hear about it from your perspective. So I really appreciate you joining us tonight.
I
I did want to
appreciate
mention, yeah, I did want to mention also that if what you heard inspired you or got you thinking about the islet, if you do want to pursue it further, you'll see in the chat here, you'll see there's a free insurance check link you can go to see if you've got coverage, and that's a good first step to pursue this. We have the islet is covered by both the pharmacy. How's he doing? He's
it.
clearly not stressed by our conversation.
Look at this.
Nice. But if we have access. The iLet can be reimbursed through both the pharmacy channel and the durable medical equipment channel. So many people are getting access to it in a couple of different ways. So do check that out. And yeah, otherwise, thank you all for joining us again. I want to thank you, Gary, for participating. It was a wonderful conversation tonight. I really enjoyed it.
I'm super grateful, man. Thank you for your diligence and hard work and dedication to creating something that really can help so many people. And I'm super grateful to have gone through these challenges, and now super grateful to be using technology in the right way to better my life.
Thanks very much, Gary. I appreciate that. Folks, good night, everybody. Thanks for joining.